Okay, we're going.
Okay, I would like to call this administration committee meeting to order. Roll call. Andra Engels, John Marshall, and Mary McGrattan. We are all here. Are there any citizens who wish to make any comments?
Hi, I'm Jim Arak. It's been an honor to find out that I'm being considered for PNC, and I'm just here to answer any questions. I'd be happy to do that during your consideration.
Good. Okay, you're on the agenda for tonight. Okay.
Eric Treaster, I'd like to address the committee briefly.
Yes.
The reason I'm here this evening is, as you know, I'm concerned about short-term rentals.
What?
Really, I really am. You look surprised. Anyhow, the town ordinance will expire at the end of February, and if I remember correctly, at the last admin meeting, someone indicated that the existing ordinance was going to be sent to the town attorney for his additional review. And I'm concerned that that might be putting the cart before the horse, that it might be more appropriate for the town to decide what it wants to do before it figures out how to do it. For example, do we want to continue to have non-hosted short-term rentals? Every one of the problems in the past couple of years has been with a non-hosted short-term rental. And about half of the short-term rentals are unlicensed. About half have had problems. So as you know, I'm opposed to short-term rentals in general, but I recognize that I'm maybe in the minority. But the other alternative is to have hosted short-term rentals. And there's a dramatic decline in problems across the country for short-term rentals that are hosted. And I submitted a suggested set of regulations on the zoning side of the house that would I believe achieve the objectives for allowing short-term rentals provided they're hosted. That same set of zoning regulations, the draft zoning regulations that I prepared and submitted, and it's in your record, can easily be tweaked into an ordinance format and would work equally well. But it's just a thought. So what I'm suggesting is that when you get to that agenda item this evening on short-term rentals, that you make a decision as far as what you want to do, rather than, and then if you want to prohibit them, then that translates into a particular path. If you want to allow them but host it only, then that translates into another path. And if you want to try to repair if you want to continue but try to fix the ordinance so it works better, then that translates into a third path. But that decision has to be made by someone, and I think it starts with this committee. So that's the reason I'm here tonight, is to mention my perspective and my recommendation that short-term rentals are commercial land use. They're commercial land use because the occupancy tax is charged by the state of Connecticut, same as for hotels. Hotels, short-term rentals, land use goes in zoning, fairly simple. Zoning has a well-established enforcement mechanism, and NOAC bumped into the same problem. They took the position of no short-term rentals at all, anywhere, at any time. But in any case, it's time for policy to be formulated and placed on the record. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to address the committee?
Yeah, Mary, could I go next, because it follows on pretty well after what Eric said. I have a few constructive comments, and I'm going to rearrange my order based on what Eric just said. I agree that if we do have these, they need to be hosted, but we need to be very aware of how we define hosted. We need to define it as owner hosted, not owner surrogate. Because if we put it in, I think the way it is in now, it talks about the host being the owner or being designated by the owner. If that turns out to be the case, then, on a very broad definition, you could say, well, the host of the party for that day is the host. And so it's hosted. The guy that pays the money, the guy that, makes arrangements for everybody to come in, the guy that buys the alcohol, the guy that gets the DJ could be considered the host of the party, the MC. So you need to define very clearly that hosted means owner only hosted. The second point is, I agree that all these should be considered commercial ventures. And I think they should be taxed. You should look into taxing these the way you tax home businesses. I know my consulting business for the last 17 years has been taxed. My desk, my chair, my telephone have all been taxed as uses. These should be taxed in such a way that the beds, the linens, the tables, the chairs, the kitchen, the pots, the pans, and if there's a pool, the salt for the pool should all be considered supplies or uses that are taxed. So you probably might want to think about how you're going to address the tax base for this. And I would say use the same thing you use for our home businesses for that. The other thing I've heard over the last 3 or 4 meetings is that we can't really just abandon the ordinance because Airbnb will sue us. And I think we really ought to think about that statement, because with Airbnb, with hundreds of thousands of properties, which they collect fees, they're not going to sue the tiny town of Ledyard over 5 properties. And besides, if they would, we could countersue them for fostering illegal activity in the town, because they're still sending renters to places that they've been informed do not have permits to operate. If we did send out the cease and desist order and they ignored it, then Airbnb could be notified that they're now complicit in a felony if they were to continue to send renters to the place. So I think that's something that should be considered. The other point I wanted to make is that the world basically functions on the premise that the one must not be allowed to inconvenience the many. It's the reason that you can't smoke in public places. You can smoke in your house, but you can't smoke in a theater. You can't smoke on a train. You can't smoke on an airplane. You can't smoke in public buildings. Public disturbance is the same thing. Things you can do in your house, you can't do in public. But isn't this exactly what we're looking at here? When you have a situation where one person in a neighborhood can have a bachelor party or whatever that gets out of control, and all the other people are inconvenienced. The final point I wanted to make, which is what I was going to start with, is we're now 77 days since the voluntary compliance letter went out to all these places. And I can tell you for the 6 Esca Drive, 46 of those 77 days have been renter occupied. This entire last week, 8 days of the last 8 days have all been occupied. Saturday and Sunday, again, was just like in the summer. There were 9 cars in the driveway. 2 of the cars were on the road. 15 people that I could count. They were inside instead of outside on the deck, so it wasn't quite as easy for me to count them. But I can see right into the kitchen and the dining room area windows, and I counted who I could, and there were 15. We could hear the noise on the street. I could hear the noise in my backyard from inside the house. I'm really not looking forward to what's going to happen in April when they go back outside, go back into the pools, if we don't come up with something here that has teeth. That's all I have, Mary. I'll yield back.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? Okay, moving on. Does anybody, Andra or John, do you have any informational items?
I do not, Mary.
No, I do not.
Okay, then I move that we accept the regular meeting minutes of October 13th, 2021.
I'll
Is there-
second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, under old business, review the ordinance 300, an ordinance regulating short-term rentals in the town of Ledyard relative to no permit, formal complaints, possible amendments and action to extend the ordinance. I have asked our zoning enforcement officer to check with the attorney as to how we can control, or how we can, maybe punish is too harsh a word, punish the people who are using the short-term rentals without getting the proper permits. This was an item we never discussed or even thought about when we passed it almost 2 years ago. It was the noise, it was the traffic, and that type of thing. So I have asked Mike Cherry to please talk to, I think it's Carl Andolino, and to see if there's something we can do to take care of that. But when you look at, we have a little under 6,000 homeowners in the town of Ledyard. We're talking about 5 that we know of. I'm not saying they're not out there, that we know of. 5 homes that are operating this way without a permit. Okay, Mike, do you have anything? Mike Cherry? He was here a minute ago.
Yeah, I'm here. I just got to figure out how to unmute.
Oh,
I did talk to Attorney Landolina. And his feeling is we have the authority, just like we did when we issued the current ordinance, to enforce rules that fall under 7148 municipal powers. And he said, if you look at nuisance and health and use of buildings, he says there's more than adequate spots to go do that. What I've run up against is the ordinance assumed everybody went to parochial school and they were going to follow the rules because there were rules. So there's no teeth in the ordinance to move people in the right direction. I don't know how many saw the newspaper article this week. Groton is looking at a short-term rental ordinance, and they laid out, the ordinance was in the paper with some of their fines. But I think it's important that we have a penalty for having a short-term rental without a permit. I think it's important that we have a penalty for people who don't follow the rules. And that can lead to a revocation of their permit. The only one we have now is if you're a bad actor, we can take away your permit. But as Jim will attest, for the guy next door, I don't care how many times I send a letter. I don't care how many times Jim is sure that it gets in the mailbox or that the people renting are aware of the fact that there's a letter. It hasn't had much effect. And I've started, the first letter goes by mail. The second letter goes by mail and registered, because a lot of these we get no answer, no acknowledgement whatsoever. Some of them, when they got the letter, they came in to get a permit. And we may have misinterpreted ordinance, I think it's 304, that says you can't get a building permit if your taxes are overdue. Doesn't say anything about short-term rental permits, doesn't say anything about zoning permits, but there's some people we failed to issue them a permit because their taxes were overdue. And then when we went and looked, we took some of the other advice provided by residents that, hey, when I look online, they got a 3-bedroom home. When I look on Airbnb, they got a 5-bedroom home, which is right. And we took them to task on that, and they wanted to go fix it, but they found out they couldn't because their septic system wouldn't support the 5 bedrooms they were claiming. So it's more difficult and more complex than we imagine. Send them a letter and they're just going to follow the rules. We need to have a bigger stick. And Carl's recommendation is put penalties in the ordinance, use the citation tools that Eric so kindly wrote for zoning. There's an ordinance for citations for zoning. That same ordinance is used pretty close for wetlands. And Carl's recommendation is figure out all the municipal citations, take all your various ordinances on citation, make it one, because they should all follow the same policy, and use that. The other thing I'd caution, Mary, I don't know if I sent it to you, if I sent it to Roxanne, but there's a federal case in Lake Placid, New York, recent.
Yes, you could send it to me.
It's
but I'm
good. It's good
unable-
bedtime reading. It'll put you to sleep.
Oh, okay.
But until that gets absorbed a little bit, that kind of says people who, the town of Lake Placid, North Elba went in and decided that hosted was good, non-hosted was bad. They treated them differently and they set different rules for them. The non-hosted people complained and said, you're discriminating against us. This is not equal protection under the law. This violates the Constitution. You can't do that. I haven't gotten through the whole opinion to see if the judge agreed with them or not. But we need to make sure whatever we do is consistent and fair across the board. I did talk with the Director of Land Use today, and she's of the opinion that putting it in zoning may not help us as much as we would hope. It may help us more to have the penalties in an ordinance. I agree with Mr. Treaster that zoning has a well-defined progressive discipline plan, if you will. But we may not want bad actors under short-term rentals to be afforded all of those progressive discipline options. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but we're at the point where we are getting some people in for their renewals. And I will say, some of the people who got letters were quite honest and said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was a one-time thing. I'm not doing it anymore. And I'll also tell you, it's almost impossible for me in the time that I have to go into like Airbnb or VRBO, look at the listings for Ledyard and try and match those pictures against properties in the town of Ledyard, because there is no address. It's just a picture. So I think my time is better spent than driving around town going, is that this guy? No, I don't think so. So, it's kind of like, where's Waldo? It's difficult, but I will answer any questions if you have some.
Okay, did Attorney Landolino tell you how to sort of incorporate that citation ordinance into the short term?
No, but I've got a couple of good examples in wetlands and zoning that I can use to incorporate it.
Okay,
And I can provide you a draft for your next meeting. You
Okay.
meet once a month, right?
yes, we do.
Okay, yeah, if it was every 2 weeks, I'd have to say 2 meetings now, but I can get you something for your next meeting.
Okay, okay. But
Um,
that's the one thing that frustrates me, is because it's something we never talked about
Yeah.
2 years ago. We talked about everything else but. And there are people who are in compliance. There are 2 permitted homes that are hosted, and they're not causing any problems.
And there are unhosted areas where we've identified a problem to them and they've taken action to correct it. And obviously we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer to see how long that corrective action lasts. But then there are others who are just bad players, and those are the guys we need to get after to, like you said, it's 5 out of 6,000, 6,500, something like that.
Right.
That's a
Right.
small number, but if you happen to live next door, that one is a very big number.
Yep. So I just have a couple comments. Is there anything more immediate we can do to drop the hammer on the bad actors?
I,
That's what I was hoping that we could get from the attorney, so we could take sort of immediate action to, get after those couple that are, especially the one on Eska Drive,
Yeah.
continues to violate the ordinance despite getting.
I am in favor of doing swiftly whatever is within our ability to do.
Right, right.
The other
Well-
comment to make right now, which maybe is a little premature, but I'm really not in favor of handling this through zoning. I've read so much about this, as have many of you over the last couple of years. the way I see it, the problem is not where the property is. The problem is the moral agent operating the property. Is that person doing a good job or a poor job?
Correct.
And if you're doing a good job, it doesn't matter where the property is. So we can, if we do it through zoning, I think that's missing the point. The point is enabling great people to do something with their home that's really a win-win, and severely discouraging and mitigating the problems created by people who refuse to play by the rules with no respect for their neighbors. And if that means we take another swipe at the ordinance and figure out what the fines are, what the, taxing it as a business, I think that's something to look at. I don't know what the implications are. But yeah, my instinct is to handle it through the ordinance, not through zoning, again, because it's not about where the property is. It's about who's operating the rental.
Well, and I'll go back to Carl. Sometimes, a letter from the short-term rental enforcement officer doesn't carry the same weight as a strong letter from the town's attorney.
Right.
So
I would also say, let's just start with the registered letter. Let's skip it. Skip the regular mail and go straight to the registered letter and save that time. I think that's a very simple first step, but you're probably talking about a week or two.
Well, it also, the registered letter tells me they got it and I can start a clock,
Right.
Jim saying it's been 70 some days. Yeah, it has. Some of those, we don't know they ever got it. We know they've got it, but we have no legal,
Right.
nothing I can bring to court saying they had it, they knew, they ignored it.
Right.
Um,
Right. So for
and
that
Jim,
reason,
I know, unless I take a picture of you putting the thing in their mailbox again and again and again, I don't know what we have for the judge.
I know, and that probably wouldn't stand up in the court of law if I said I put it in on this day anyway.
But I can do that. That's simple, Andra, and I'll get, let's go, I'll go after the 6 who seems hell-bent on ignoring everything we do. I'll get the strong letter from the lawyer and see what that does.
Right. Eric, you have something else?
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, Andra and I disagree on this.
we disagree on this.
I think a non-hosted STR is the same thing as a single unit hotel. And I don't think a single unit hotel should, without a manager, without a resident manager, should be allowed in a residential district.
That's not necessarily a zoning issue, though. We could fix that. I don't disagree with you on that.
No,
Eric.
that is a zoning issue. That hotels are not allowed in residential districts.
Right.
And
Okay, but I think we're playing word games now, but we could fix the hosted, non-hosted issue through the ordinance. And I don't disagree.
we could. And like I said, the zoning regs that I submitted to you can easily be converted into an ordinance. It's trivial, less than a day. But I also agree with Jim that and Mike that if next door is the problem, it's a big problem for that taxpayer, for that
Absolutely.
resident. And I don't, and my policy is that your rights, the individual property owner's rights are important. And I do not detect the right of anyone to operate a hotel in a residential district. That's just my opinion, and I would be willing to take it to court if necessary. But in any case, in answer to Mike's question on the enforcement, everyone, 99.99% of people who are in violation of an ordinance or a law or anything will not sign for a registered letter. So it's a waste of.
They get 2 letters from me if it's registered. They get one regular mail and one
Right.
registered to go out at the same time.
But that ordinary mail does not prove receipt.
No.
So the.
But at least I'd get a registered letter back saying they refused it. Now I've got nothing.
No, that nobody picked it up. It's not refused, it's not picked up.
But at least I know they never got it. Now I have no idea.
Let me propose an alternative. A standard letter from the attorney, standard format letter, he can use it over and over again. Most people who know that they're in violation of something, an attorney from a letter gets their attention. So I do recommend that. $150, done deal. But for $500, you can have a state marshal serve a complaint to that individual, summons and complaint, and start litigation immediately. And that will, I guarantee that will get attention. So
Some of our non-hosted short-term rentals are owned by LLCs in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Kansas and
Yep. But they're all registered with the state. They all have a manager. That manager has an address. That they have an agent for service of process, and it's documented with the state. If it's not documented with the state, that's a crime in itself, and that's a different issue. But there are ways to get attention in the short term if we choose to do so. Costs money. Hate to say it. I would like a better explanation. I haven't heard it yet, but I would like a better explanation of why, if short-term rentals is a commercial use, and they're a commercial use because the occupancy tax is due, and we do not allow, except for home occupations, we do not allow commercial uses in residential districts. Those home occupations have to be virtually invisible. We even limit the number of customers that can come per day. No signs, no nothing, nothing for a home occupation, and it works well. And the enforcement techniques are, and we use the zoning's enforcement mechanism to do it. But I think we need a better explanation of why land use regulations is inappropriate for this particular land use. So that's one issue. On Jim's concern about the definition of a host is critical. I think if you look at the proposed zoning regs that I submitted to you a couple days ago, it defines host very carefully. I think that will be a sufficient definition for host. A cease and desist order has an immediate effect, and that is it's a felony if it's ignored, and that is fast, and only zoning can issue cease and desist orders. So just ask for a really good reason why an ordinance is better than regulations, better than land use regulations in the zoning regs. I have not heard it yet, but I'm willing to help. If the ordinance is the way to go, I'd be more than happy to convert those regulations into an ordinance format. I'm good at it. As you know, it works, and I'd be happy to do that. But the first decision that needs to be made, a formal decision, and I don't know who makes it. I think it's the town council, but it could be P&Z. But the first decision is, do we want to allow non-hosted short-term rentals and the answer to that is either yes or no. And I would vote no. If the issue was between, I could probably be twisted to, I could probably support hosted STRs because they're a non-problem. They're very similar to people who rent out their rooms, a rooming house. Zoning regulations have allowed rooming houses since 1963. And never a problem. We don't have any problems with rooming houses in Ledyard, and a hosted STR is very similar to a rooming house. So just, I just think that we need a better explanation of the benefits of an ordinance versus the benefits of land use regulations. So thank you.
Okay, Eric, thank you. John, you have something?
Yeah, at first I like the idea of putting this into zoning because of the enforcement aspect. It already has the penalties built into the zoning regs. I kind of like that, the immediate action. But now I'm kind of leaning the other way after hearing all these arguments. And I was just wondering, how strong is the penalty ordinance that we have that would handle an ordinance?
It's as strong as we would like to make it. The fee, the penalties can be as much as $150 per event, and you can define event as each day you're in violation if you so desire. So the fees, the penalty adds up quickly. It does go to a hearing officer who has the authority to mitigate some of the penalty in exchange for abiding by the rules. So I mean, it does have a right of redress, just as zoning regulations do. It's been around for a long time. It's like the fourth step in the progressive discipline in the zoning world. You know,
If these were hosted Airbnbs, could they be considered a home occupation under
No.
those regulations?
I don't think so. I think you're talking a different animal. I mean, that's not for me to say. That's something for the Planning and Zoning Commission to take up. And you know, when you sit there and go, okay, let's make a decision, who owns it? Well, Town Council owns it under 7-148, and Planning and Zoning owns it under 8-2. And both entities get their power from different sections of state statute. What should the policy be in Ledyard? I think that's something that, you know, Planning and Zoning and the Town Council need to decide which way to go, and then how to prescribe it and how to enforce it is a different issue.
Yes, I've heard a lot of great ideas tonight between yourself and Eric and the rest of the committee. I know there's a common ground here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I went and talked to our lawyer because eventually a bad player is going to end up in court, and the lawyer I talked to would be who would be representing the town of Ledyard. So I kind of defer to him and say, okay, what's the best platform to give you to defend us in this case? And he came up and said, ordinance with citations.
So Mike, can we commit to by the time of the next admin committee? And I don't know how this works because this council is winding down and the new council will be sworn in the first week of December.
Yeah, December 6th, I think.
So
So the next meeting, if it goes according to, would be December the 8th.
okay, so that will be the new council. So I'm
Yes.
not even sure how, you know, what we have to wind down and then start
Yeah.
back up. But I would really like to commit to having at the next admin meeting, know what those punitive steps are. This cannot keep dragging on month after month. We need to know where we're going with this.
Well, that's what I mean, you know, is it going to be an ordinance or is it going to be zoning regs? And if you take,
Do we
if you
need to
take
vote?
the premise, if
Motion
you
on the
take the,
table.
yeah, but if you
In my
take the
opinion,
premise,
I'm not you know, I'm only speaking for myself. I've been clear that I think it's an ordinance is the best place to handle it.
that's what I'm hearing
I'm one of
from,
three
the
voices here that
experts.
would vote in it, but, yeah, so Mary, I don't know what we do tonight, but we need to provide some hope and some relief to our property owners who are abiding by the rules and suffering at the hands of those who could not be bothered being respectful human beings to their neighbors.
Okay, Mike, do you think you would have something?
Yeah, I can get you a straw man before that and a draft for your next meeting.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Eric?
One other thing that needs to be resolved is it the consensus of the admin committee to allow both hosted and non-hosted continued, or go to hosted?
Posted only.
And I strongly recommend if you're going to go forward, limit it to hosted if there's a legal way to do so. And I believe that there is a legal way to do so. Also, if the consensus tonight is that you're going to go the ordinance route, I'll be happy to draft a set of a tentative ordinance that will be at least sufficient for an attorney review, if you wish. your decision, that would save 4 weeks, and February 27th is coming up here pretty quickly, and that's when then it becomes really ambiguous, and I don't think we should go there. So thank you.
Okay, John, you said that you are in favor of only hosted?
Correct, because of the history behind hosted only Airbnbs. Owner occupied, hosted only.
Okay. Andra?
I could be persuaded to do that. I don't think it's a bad idea. I'd like to see someone tonight mentioned some data on that. I don't know if it was Mike or Eric.
I mean, I agree. Most of the bad actors are when there's no adult supervision, which is non-hosted.
And then to Jim's point, it's who's the host.
And,
Right.
but I
Owner
would,
host only.
I got to go back and talk to Carl now that this decision from the federal courts came down in New York, and make sure that we're not just setting ourselves up to have an ordinance we can't enforce because
Right,
it violates Constitution.
right.
So I'll
So
ask
then
that
does it mean
question.
that, okay, so I rent out my basement apartment. I don't have a basement apartment, purely hypothetical, folks.
I'm
rent
coming
out
by
my
to check next week.
You'd be awfully disappointed. So I rent it out for the weekend, and I live here, I'm supposedly hosting. Okay. Does that mean I'm not allowed to set foot off of my property all weekend while somebody's here?
No,
I don't think so.
it just means it's an owner occupied residence. And there's nothing that prevents you from being somewhere else. I would frown on it greatly if you went.
Hosted, though.
Yeah, I would frown on it if you went and rented a motel room while you were renting out your home. I think that violates the spirit of a hosted.
Right. But now you just brought up the difference between saying it's owner hosted and owner occupied.
Correct.
So,
I can always find out if it's owner occupied. But I can't always find out. Once again, from an enforcement point of view, how do I know whether they're there over the weekend? But
right.
I can know whether or not they live there.
So you mentioned that some of these permits were to LLCs.
Correct.
The
I thought
only
the
one
ordinance-
we had was the fellow on Eska Drive. When we first found out what he was doing, the address we had was from the Bronx.
Correct.
Then found out that he lived in New London and his father lived in Ledyard. So I'm not sure why he used that Bronx address, but that's.
But there are others without permits that when we go to send them a letter saying you're violating the ordinance, the address that's on record with the assessor is in the Bronx or Brooklyn. So it's not, and it's an LLC. They don't have a permit. I'm not sure they could even get one under our current ordinance. So we're telling them they got to stop.
So you're saying the ones who are operating without a permit are the ones who are doing it.
That's
as
what I'm,
LLCs?
that, well,
Because
those
I
are the
remember we
ones
did
I'm
put that in
seeing
the
now.
ordinance. We did talk about that we didn't want people doing that.
Well, on a average week, I get 3 to 4 calls from out of town real estate agents wanting to know what the short-term rental policy is in Ledyard. And the only reason they'd be calling is because they found a property somebody wants to buy and use exclusively as a short-term rental.
Right.
Um,
And I think we all agree that nobody wants that.
And we need to decide how to prevent it. And I'll talk to Carl to make sure that that we haven't stepped over the edge on ability to enforce.
Yeah. We did try to prevent that.
Yes.
Okay, Eric.
By requiring that they be hosted, and look at my definition for hosted that I submitted to you. Okay, it's well defined. I think it will be sufficient, but if not, it can be tweaked. But by requiring it to be hosted, that will automatically solve all of those types of problems as far as ownership and hosted and so forth. You cannot have an LLC living in a home. It takes a human being to live for domicile. So all we have to do is require that the domicile of the owner of the short-term rental, that domicile be in that short-term rental, that same address.
What's that?
That's simple. The other thing is that the lawsuit on the takings clause that Mike referenced is based upon an ordinance and not zoning. Zoning takes property rights away all the time. That's a charter. And as long as you don't take all reasonable uses away under zoning, it's lawful. And there's 100 years of precedents and laws and local and federal and constitutional and everything that supports zoning's right to severely constrain, as long as you don't limit all reasonable uses, you can severely constrain the uses of property. You tell which property is residential, which property is commercial. You limit the uses within them. You can even establish by special permit, you can even tell what colors they have to be. You can do all sorts of things under zoning. An ordinance can easily be interpreted as a taking, especially if you're taking something away that they previously had. So when you talk with Carl, ask him about that issue, that zoning by its fundamental nature is the constraints on uses of property. That's what zoning does. That's how come it's not very popular, because people don't like to have things taken away from them. We even prohibit garages if they're too close to the property line. All right, that's a taking. And if you look at it literally, but it's a constitutional taking. These issues have been resolved dozens and dozens and dozens of years ago. So the STR argument it's much more difficult to make a claim of a taking if it's in zoning than perhaps if it's in ordinance and under an ordinance. So Mike, when you talk with Carl, bring up that specific subject. And
I will.
And because I think it may have merit, and it's certainly worth discussing. So thank you. And I'll be quiet. I know this meeting's running too long. I apologize.
Okay, then let's move on. We have no, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Bye.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Good night. Okay, under new business, I make a motion to recommend the town council reappoint the following members to the Parks and Recreation Commission for a 3-year term ending December the 29th, 2024. Lucretia Finnegan, a Republican, 1331 Baldwin Road, and Thomas Olson, unaffiliated, 1083 Long Cove Road.
Second.
Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, number 2. I make a motion to recommend the town council reappoint Brian Cronin, unaffiliated, 12 Erin's Way, to the Library Commission for a 2-year term ending November the 7th, 2023.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you say who or?
No, we both said it. Sorry.
Oh, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, okay. I make a motion to recommend the town council appoint J.A. Capon, a Democrat, 37 Silas Dean Road, to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a regular member to complete a 3-year term ending October 21st, 2024, filling a vacancy left by Mr. Cherry.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, John, do you want to take number 4?
Sure. Motion to appoint Mr. James Arwatch, Republican, 1538 Route 12, Unit C30, Gales Ferry, to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a 3-year term ending October 31st, 2024, filling the vacancy left by Mr. Mike Cherry.
I'll second that.
Well, so, okay, I'm confused though, because
Supposed to say filling a vacancy left by Mr. Capon.
it's supposed, Wait a minute.
It should say he's filling an alternate member position for Mr. Capon, because we're moving Mr. Capon, who was an alternate, up to Mike Cherry's position.
To a regular.
So do we need to
Right.
amend, do we need to do a friendly amendment to the motion?
You know what, actually, on my printed one, that's what it says, so I must have just
Okay,
missed something on the iCompass. But
Okay.
what's up, file in the clerk's office says they'll be filling a vacancy left by Mr. J.A. Capon.
okay, got it.
It's, yes, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. But Mr. Auroch, is that how you say it?
Yes,
Yeah,
he was
very
the man that
close.
spoke before.
Right.
Very
so
close,
he's here. I
Auroch.
would love to just hear. I see he showed up. Let the man have a say.
I second the motion. No, just kidding. Yeah, RAC. So that's a very close.
Okay.
Well,
Okay,
and so if I may, Mr. Arich has attended several planning and zoning commission meetings over the past couple of months. He's had intelligent questions. And so I happily welcome him to the commission. Nothing makes me happier than for someone to be involved with an item before the commission and decide to get involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woody.
okay, did we second that?
Not yet.
Yes, it was seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I make a recommendation that the town council appoint Hillary Evans, a Democrat, 1538 Route 12, to the Planning and Zoning Commission as an alternate member to complete a 3-year term ending October 21st, 2023, filling a vacancy left by Ms. Evans when she was appointed to the town council back in July. So that seat was never filled, so she's wants to go back on that.
Second.
So I have a question for this and the next motion. She's still a seated counselor, so this just seems like a couple weeks premature to me.
Well, she wouldn't be voted on by the full council until December. And she, by that time, would be off the town council. The second, she would be voted on, let's say, December the 8th. Her term on the council ends December the 6th.
Okay,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay. I move to recommend the town council appoint Hillary Evans, a Democrat, 1538 Route 12, to the Housing Authority to complete a 5-year term ending March 31st, 2026, filling a vacancy left by Ms. Evans. It's the same, her vacancy on Housing Authority was never filled. So she would like to go back on that now that she will be off the town council. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, you want to take the next one, Andra?
Yeah, I make a motion to adopt proposed amendments to ordinance 200001, an ordinance for purchasing as contained in the draft dated October 26th, 2021.
I'll second that.
Okay, so this was forwarded to us from finance, and it's the result of recommendations that the auditors made to just clarify the purchasing ordinance. Finance did not need any changes to it. They just wanted admin to look at it for a second set of eyes.
Okay. There a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye. You want to do the next one too, please?
sure. I make a motion to schedule a virtual public hearing on January 26th, 2022 at 6:30 PM to receive comments and recommendations regarding proposed amendments to ordinance 200001, revision 1, and ordinance for purchasing as contained in the draft dated October 26th, 2021.
Second.
Just setting a public hearing. There's really no.
Right, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next and last item is the transition of outstanding unfinished business items to be forwarded to the incoming administration committee. The only thing I can think of is the short-term rental ordinance that
Mhm.
will just carry over. And there's just going to be a lot of routine appointments and reappointments, but I'm not sure I know of anything else that we would want to pass on to the new council.
Right,
I
I
agree.
don't have anything.
I think we're kind of up to date on what was given to us.
Mhm.
Okay, hearing any other business to come?
Quick question, Mary.
Sure.
So what happens on the 27th if we haven't gotten anywhere with the SDR ordinance?
It goes out, it sunsets,
It disappears.
it disappears unless we do something. And I'm not sure if it just, we let it die quietly, or we can just sort of temporarily halt it, accept no new applications and revisit it if we're not done. I'm not sure the answer to that.
Because I don't know if we can put this together in a couple of months.
Maybe not.
You know, like Andrea said, there's some good people out there doing the right things, and they're gonna be punished for the one or two that are screwing things up.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's not right
No,
either.
that's right. Yeah. Okay,
Like I said, I think there's common ground here somewhere. We just gotta find it.
right. Okay, hearing nothing else, I'll call the meeting, adjourn the meeting.
All right, very good. We'll see you in half an hour.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and for your input.